No, I was just going to say, when you mentioned Leibniz, obviously with an extension of the principle of sufficient reason was Leibniz's conclusion that this universe exists because God created it because it's the best of all possible worlds. I'm curious, in the CTMU, there's all this talk from modern physicists about multiverse and why this universe and not others, and some have proposed a fine-tuning argument on that basis. I'm curious, in the CTMU, what would your answer be to why this universe and not the other infinite possibilities? Is this the best possible world that God shows, or is there an element of kind of freedom in it on God's part? Or
It's the best because it provides the potential for the best possible outcome. However, it's up to us whether or not that outcome is going to be realized. So the universe is perfect. It's been perfectly structured for that purpose, okay? But we're constantly lousing it up. As a matter of fact, life itself kind of louses it up in many ways, right? I mean, there's a lot of cruelty in the world of biological evolution, for example, that appears to be pointless and appears to make this something other than the best of all possible worlds. But if you take everything into account, from the beginning of reality to the very end of reality, from the alpha to the omega, and the entirety of reality, the entire universe, and you then evaluate that statement over everything, this is the best of all possible worlds. That's the way it was structured. And as a matter of fact, it was structured so that within this universe, it is necessary to come to that conclusion. So Leibniz was 100% right about that. It's just that there is a lot that goes into, we need to cooperate with that. We're evolving to the point at which we can make this the best of all possible worlds for ourselves and for the other species that live in it. But we haven't reached that stage yet. Okay? God allowed for us to evolve to that stage and gave us all the incentives, both positive and negative, to evolve there, and that's what we've been doing. And now, of course, they're trying to stop that evolution dead by, with this nonsense that they're pulling now. But we won't go into that. Or maybe we will. It's up to you.
I have a feeling we'll get into that a little bit later, but yeah, I just want to cover more of the basics of CTMU. So evolution is purposive in this system. So I guess the question is, what is life evolving towards? Like what is the end purpose of conscious beings?
It's basically the self-identification of reality, experientially and logically. Reality is seeking to know itself. This is a correlate of the fact that ontology and epistemology are coupled. The reason for being is self-knowledge of the universe, or the primary monad, as Leibniz would have put it, which is God. Okay? Leibniz believed in God. And of course, he had a stratospheric level of intelligence, as did Newton, as did Descartes, as did a lot of the other people that were considered great philosophers in that day. They all believed in God. And there's a very good reason for that, because without God, you can't build an overall theory of reality. It's the first requirement. You need something from which all of the coherence of reality derives. All right? And it turns out that there's only one way to describe that. And that way turns out to also double as a description of God. All right, now we can argue, quibble about the properties of God. Well, what is a divine property? What is God really? But this is the way it turns out. That, there are all kinds of people today who are trying to tell you that, philosophers of this magnitude were totally idiotic, right? And the universe is all mechanistic, according to, as depicted in the mechanistic semi-model of Descartes. But that has never been the case, okay? Well, people are being deluded about that now. So we've got to get back to this generic description of God that is necessary to our understanding of reality.
And how would you evaluate the kind of traditional arguments for God, like the cosmological argument, the fine-tuning argument, the ontological argument? Because obviously these really went out of fashion with Kant, didn't they? He kind of deconstructed that these were all a version of the ontological argument, and that this made existence predicate. This kind of argument was really influential, and it seems like sort of theistic apologetics has kind of fallen by the wayside since Kant, although it seems to be having something of a resurgence. I read a book called Universes by a philosopher called John Leslie recently that really argued powerfully for a modern fine-tuning argument, just based off what we know about modern physics, things like the cosmological constant. So I'm curious how you'd evaluate them, and if there's one of those that you think is especially powerful.
They all have their proper context. The most powerful and general argument is usually called is something that is usually called the ontological argument, right? Which was basically put forth by Anselm and has been repeated in numerous forms by other philosophers. But within the framework of that ontological argument, which is, by the way, the CTMU, all of the conventional arguments for God, the cosmological, teleological argument, all of them can be interpreted. Okay, but you need this overall logical framework, this metalogical framework, in which to interpret them. Okay, these guys were all, great philosophers that bless their hearts, were working without a grand overall philosophical framework, and they were trying their best, but a lot of their efforts came to naught for that reason. We can do better.